Piloting a survey is like a dress rehearsal for collecting real data, and it's an essential part of the process. Pilots are most effective if you have already designed all of the questions and are as close as possible to the final version. In other words, you should take the pilot seriously. If you add things later without testing them in a pilot, then you can end up wasting lots of time. This can even compromise the quality of the data that you collect. During the pilot, you should record the time it takes to conduct each interview. This helps in planning the rest of the project and in calculating how many surveys will be possible per day for each enumerator. However, keep in mind that the first few times that enumerators administer a survey, it's going to take a bit longer than it will in the future when they're more familiar with the survey. After the pilot, the survey usually needs some adjustments. There may be questions in which the enumerator is responsible for choosing a code for the responses. So for example, if they have to choose an occupation from a list of typical occupations in that area. If there's a common occupation that's been left off of this list, this can make things more complicated later on when lots of responses are marked other. Feedback from the pilot can help to identify questions which are unclear or possibly difficult to understand, and also any questions that turn out to make respondents feel uncomfortable. Such questions might be asked in a more sensitive manner. You should also consider eliminating questions in the survey if there's no variation in responses, or if a large number of respondents refuse to answer them. This is just going to take up valuable time and not provide anything useful. Keep in mind, though, that the group of respondents for the pilot may not be representative of the population as a whole. Large-scale surveys usually have a manual to which enumerators can refer that explains the protocol in detail. This includes the sampling procedure and what to do if respondents are unavailable. So including how to approach subjects and present the survey, the explanations of individual questions, and the coding process in more detail. In the manual, try to think of potential problems that might be encountered and explain how you would like enumerators to deal with these problems once they're in the field. This manual will also be useful as a reference for explaining the data in the analysis after the survey data is collected. People working with the data might have questions about exactly how questions were asked and how responses were classified. When conducting fieldwork, the survey manager's job is to monitor the data collection. You should periodically look through questionnaires to make sure that they are properly filled out and that the numbers on the questionnaires make sense together. After the data is collected, you may need to hire a team to type it into digital form. Ideally, there should be a manual for this as well, including names of variables corresponding to each question, and remember to pay attention to units where it's appropriate. It's always a good idea to save the original data that's been entered before making any changes. Even though the data will need to be cleaned and processed in order to make it easier to work with, don't throw away the old versions in case there's some mistake. When conducting data entry, or putting information from paper surveys to digital form, there are a few free programs that make this a lot easier. Two good examples are ODK and CS Pro. While using one of these programs requires taking some time to learn new software, it really minimizes the number of mistakes made, and in the long run it actually saves time. It's also much more efficient than using a spreadsheet to enter the data. If you do, however, use a spreadsheet program like Excel, then be sure not to use merge cells. In any format, numerical data should be recorded as numbers. The unit should be recorded as a separate value. It's also important to record missing values, distinguishing between a 0 and a missing value. And also it's useful to distinguish between other reasons for an empty response, like refuse to respond or don't know, from simply missing, which would indicate that the enumerator didn't do their job. Okay, so electronic data collection. This is using phones or tablets with no paper questionnaires and directly recording the data in electronic format while in the field. In addition to making the collection of interview data easier, electronic data collection makes it easier to attach photographs to surveys and to record GPS coordinates and take video. This can also make things simpler and easier for enumerators. If some questions are conditional on earlier responses, so in other words, if some questions are only asked if some criteria is met, then it's really simple to program this in an electronic data collection program. That reduces the chances of human error. Electronic data collection also allows you to check the consistency of responses in real time. For example, let's say that you ask people about the number of household members. Then later you ask how many of the people in the household have fallen ill over the past month. Obviously, the latter should be less than or equal to the former. You can't have more sick people in a household than you have people in the household. A data collection program can alert enumerators if this is not the case and prompt them to double-check the information. Some programs also allow you to plot GPS programs on a map so that you can see exactly where enumerators have been. PIN has used a program called ODK Collect, and this has been very useful for several surveys in Afghanistan. It's relatively easy to learn and has proven really effective. Check the links in the reference section of this module for more information on how to download this program, which is free, and how to use it. Electronic data collection is logistically easier, faster, it allows you to skip questions and to navigate questionnaires more easily, and allows for the collection of GPS and time metadata. On the other hand, you'll need to buy tablets and smartphones, and this can be costly. The tablets and smartphones will also have to be charged pretty much daily, and this requires reliable access to electricity on a daily basis. This might be a problem if you're working in a remote area. Also, in dangerous neighborhoods, tablets might attract unwanted attention and could ultimately lead to robberies. Since there's no paper trail, it's also important to back up the data very regularly. This requires either access to the internet or to a computer, again on a daily basis, and this might be difficult if you're in a rural area. While using the tablets is pretty easy, our enumerators, or at least the supervisors, need to have basic computer literacy if they're going to be in charge of backing up the data.